Hello everybody, my name is Mike Gaudette and welcome back to another installment of Top 5 Albums, the series where I take you through my 5 favorite albums from each year. In today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at the year 1985, and I gotta say, I was completely blown away at how many incredible albums came out of this year. Of all of the 80s videos that I've covered up to this point, this year was for me by far the hardest one to narrow down to a top 5. There were just so many gems to choose from, and there was really just a creative explosion happening on every front in so many different genres, which spawned countless classic albums, and lots of different bands and artists would be releasing some of the strongest albums of their entire discography. But after a lot of listens and some careful thought, I have officially arrived at my top 5 list. So without further ado, here are my top 5 favorite albums, starting with number 5. Coming in at number 5 is New Day Rising by Husker Du. This is their third studio album and the follow-up to the incredible double album Zen Arcade. And I like the direction that they chose to go in on this record because it still contains some of those hardcore and punk elements that we had heard on the previous releases. But it also starts to go into a direction where they are utilizing more of their melodic and pop sensibilities, but still doing so with a very dirty and raw sort of production style, which I think was a very effective move at this point in their catalog. And if you listen to the Husker Du discography in order, you'll hear this very clear evolution going from the dirty, hardcore sort of punk sound, evolving into more melodic and poppy territories with a cleaner production style. And that more melodic and poppy side all started with this record. It's 15 tracks long, and it offers a really nice selection of songs that give us the full range of all of the different sounds that the band had been exploring up to that point, and it makes for a very fun and adventurous listening experience. Bob Mould does the majority of the songwriting on here, but Grant Hart also contributed on 4 songs. I absolutely love the opening title track, New Day Rising. That has got to be my favorite opening track of any Husker Du album, and it's a really simple song with only 3 lyrics, but the melody of those lyrics and the overall groove and the, momentum and build of the song just kickstarts the album in the most satisfying way possible. Some other standout tracks for me on here would be Grant Hart's beautiful song Books About UFOs, which I would say is probably their poppiest song to date, and I love the inclusion of the piano on this track. Again, a very clear indicator that they are evolving into some new stylistic territories. And I also really love I Apologize, Celebrated Summer, and 59 Times the Pain. And there is a track or two on here that I'm not crazy about, but for a 15-song track listing, I think this album is incredibly consistent with a lot of really standout songs that I would regard as some of my favorite tracks of the entire Husker Du discography. And if you're interested in hearing my full thoughts on all of their albums, I did a video ranking all of their studio albums, so be sure to check that out in the tier list playlist if you are interested. So that is my number 5 album. Now on to number 4. Coming in at number 4 is Acapella by Todd Rundgren. Todd Rundgren is an all-time favorite artist of mine. Not only is he an incredibly versatile multi-instrumentalist, producer, songwriter, and arranger, but he's also somebody who was constantly evolving and adapting with the times and the ever-changing technology. And an album like this really showcases how innovative and creative he was as an artist. This is an all-vocal album which consists of Todd's vocal work as well as samples of Todd's voice, which are used to produce different instrument sounds. And this record is much different from anything else that Todd had released up to this point. And now he's 11 albums into his discography, and I think choosing to go into a direction like this was a very wise choice, and it offers the listener something completely different to sink their teeth into that really showcases the genius of Todd Rundgren. There's a lot of great variety in the moods throughout this track listing. There's some more upbeat and poppy tracks like Something to Fall Back On, Mighty Love, and Hoja. There are some sadder and more expressive songs like Lost Horizon and Pretending to Care. There are some tracks that are more hard-hitting like Blue Orpheus and Lockjaw. And we even have a track that's just solo vocals, which is titled Honest Work. And I think all of these different moods provide a nice contrast within the track listing. And I just love the way that Todd utilized his voice and got such a wide variety of different sounds out of it. And this sounds unlike any other record that was released in 1985, and it really paved the way for a lot of future artists to release other albums that are more vocal-centric. My personal favorite tracks on here would be Pretending to Care, Blue Orpheus, Lost Horizon, and Something to Fall Back On. And of Todd Rundgren's very large discography of over 20 studio albums, this one actually goes down as my third favorite record of his, so it's an album that I hold in very high regard. And if you're interested in hearing my full thoughts on his entire discography, I did a video ranking all of those albums, so be sure to check that out in the tier list playlist, linked in the comments and the description if you are interested. So that is my number 4 album. Now on to number 3. Coming in at number 3 is Meat is Murder by the Smiths, an amazing record to come from this legendary English rock band. This is their second studio album, and in my opinion, this is the record where they really settled into their sound and created this perfect foundation for the remainder of their discography to continue to build off of and just flourish. The production is amazing, the songwriting is top-notch, Johnny Marr's guitar writing is just incredibly tasteful, and lyrically they delve into more political and social matters, which would end up being a staple of Morrissey's lyrical writing, and it features multiple tracks that I would regard as some of my favorite songs of the Smiths' entire discography. It's 9 tracks long with 5 songs on side 1 and 4 songs on side 2. Side 1 opens up with The Headmaster Ritual, which is in my opinion the strongest opening track of any Smiths album. I absolutely love that song. It kickstarts the album with a great energy, really nice guitar parts from Johnny Marr, and lyrically Morrissey is doing some commentary on his critiques of the English education system as well as corporal punishment. A song that is very interesting both musically and lyrically, and a great way to kickstart this amazing record. My other 2 favorite tracks from side 1 would be That Joke Isn't Funny Anymore, which is hands down my favorite song from this record, and I also love I Want the One I Can't Have. Side 2 then delivers 4 more tracks that all contrast each other very nicely and add a nice element of surprise to the remainder of the record. My 2 favorites from side 2 would be Well, I Wonder and the title track Meat is Murder, which is probably the darkest song that the Smiths had written up to that point, with a very sad and dreary mood, doing commentary on the killing of animals, and a song that had to be pretty ahead of its time for 1985 because vegetarianism was nowhere near as prevalent back then as it is today. And I love the darker side of the Smiths' writing style, and I really enjoy the fact that they chose to go in that direction for the conclusion of this record. And it does a great job of contrasting the more energetic opening track. And I think they knocked it out of the park with this record. And when it comes to 80s music, I think the Smiths were one of the bands that contributed some of the strongest albums and some of the best songs of that entire decade. And if you're interested in hearing my thoughts on their full discography, I did a video ranking all of their albums as well, so be sure to check that out in the tier list playlist, linked in the comments and the description. So that is my number 3 album. Now on to number 2. Coming in at number 2 is Hounds of Love by Kate Bush. This is an amazing album that a lot of people regard as the best record of her discography and one of the best pop records to come out of the entire decade of the 80s. It was a creative explosion on her part, giving us this great stylistic fusion of all of the different worlds that she was dabbling in, such as art rock, progressive pop, new wave, and beyond. The album is split up into 2 parts, with side 1 being titled Hounds of Love and side 2 being titled The Ninth Wave, which is a conceptual suite about a woman drifting out into the sea by herself at night. I love the instrumentations throughout this record. Lots of great different keyboards, synths, and drum machines that are complemented beautifully by Kate's amazing piano playing, as well as a string section and a choir on select tracks. Side 1 is a little more high energy and poppy in comparison to side 2, and it features all of the classic hits to come from this record, with Running Up That Hill, which is probably Kate Bush's most popular song, as well as Cloud Busting, Hounds of Love, and The Big Sky. As far as the hits go, my 2 favorites would have to be Running Up That Hill and Cloud Busting, but I also think the unsung hero of side 1 is Mother Stands for Comfort, which I regard as an exceptional and very underrated Kate Bush track track that I think gets overshadowed by all of the other hits that are on side 1. Side 2 then delivers a set of 7 tracks that all connect together beautifully, taking us through this very dreamy story of this woman drifting out into the sea, and it all culminates beautifully into the final track, which is titled The Morning Fog. And that would be my favorite track from side 2, and probably my favorite closing track of any Kate Bush record. It completely captures that feeling of waking up from a dream and being in this very hopeful mood that ends the album on a very sweet and serene note. And I think this album does a great job of capturing the best of both worlds, with the art pop singles of side 1 and then the more experimental conceptual suite of side 2. And I think it resulted in one of the best albums of Kate Bush's discography. And again, if you're interested in hearing my full thoughts on Kate Bush's discography, I did a video ranking all of her studio albums. So if you're interested in that, be sure to check that out in the tier list playlist, linked in the comments and the description. Alright, that is my number 2 album. Now for the grand reveal, here is my number 1 favorite album of 1985. Okay, my number 1 favorite album of 1985 is Steve McQueen by Prefab Sprout. Not only is this my favorite record of 1985, but it's also one of my favorite records of the entire decade of the 80s. I consider this to be one of the most underrated albums of all time, and Prefab Sprout is a criminally underrated English band, and they were known for being part of a subgenre of pop music known as sophistopop, which is a style that came out of the new wave era, where certain bands and artists were beginning to incorporate a lot more stylistic variety within their pop music. And for anybody that is looking to explore that genre more, I think this is the perfect record to start out with. The songwriting all throughout this is just impeccable. The guitar parts are amazing, so many lush and colorful chord voicings, as well as some unorthodox chord movements, paired beautifully with really tasteful keyboard and synth sounds. And the main songwriter and vocalist of this group is Paddy McAloon, who is also one of my favorite pop vocalists of all time. I think he has an absolutely beautiful voice. And lyrically, the subject matter that he writes about is both very deep, but also very clever and witty at the same time. And I really love his sense of melody. There are so many beautiful melodic moments all throughout these vocal parts. And when it comes to production, I think the production is second to none. I would go out on a limb and say this is one of the best produced albums of the entire decade of the 80s. Thomas Dolby absolutely knocked it out of the park with this one. It's hard to believe that this was released in 1985 because it sounds so ahead of its time. The album is 11 tracks long, and from front to back, I do not think there is one skip over track. I think it's a perfect track listing, and it spawned multiple songs that are regarded within the Prefab Sprout fan community as some of their classic hits, with tracks like Bonnie, When Love Breaks Down, Appetite, and Goodbye Lucille #1. And all of these songs do a great job of capturing that perfect balance of being catchy and palatable to a casual music listener, but also having lots of musical intricacies and subtleties and lush instrumentations and melodies that are a little bit outside of the ordinary. And to me, it resulted in hands down the best record of 1985. And like I said, I love every single track on here, but if I had to narrow it down to a couple of favorites, I would have to go with Appetite, Hallelujah, Desire As, Bonnie, and When Love Breaks Down. And that's almost half of the album right there, so as you could see, it was kind of hard for me to pick a few favorites because every single song on here is just a home run, and this would easily be my favorite album of 1985. And again, if you're interested in hearing my full thoughts on Prefab Sprout's entire discography, I did a video ranking all of their studio albums, so be sure to check that out as well in the tier list playlist, linked in the comments and the description if you are interested. So that is my number 1 favorite album of 1985. And to recap, at number 5, we had New Day Rising by Husker Du. At number 4, we had Acapella by Todd Rundgren. At number 3, we had Meat is Murder by The Smiths. Number 2 was Hounds of Love by Kate Bush. And number 1 is Steve McQueen by Prefab Sprout. If you haven't heard any of these albums and you give them a listen, please let me know your thoughts in the comments. I would love to hear what you think. And also, please let me know what your top 5 favorite albums of 1985 are in the comments. I would love to see your lists. All right, that is it for today. Thanks so much for watching, and stay tuned for my top 5 favorite albums of 1986. I'll see you then. Take care.